What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Shop Mini RC. I'm Ken, and today we have got something that is literally 8 months in the making. So we started this project well over 8 months ago, maybe even 9. It's been insane, and we've had a lot of work where we've tried to get things to fit and built things and tried things, and it wasn't working. So we started over, went different directions, and it's been a hellacious build for sure. But it's going to be awesome. It's going to be super sick, and some of this video, it was literally shot like 6 months ago. So just be aware, I'm kind of jumping around. I'm going to try to keep it as clean as possible, but this is going to be our 8x8x8x2, I guess, video. It's a double brushless 8x8 with 8-wheel steering. It's going to be insane, guys. It's going to be insane. So you got to stick around, check it out. I want to give a huge shout out to all the companies and people behind those companies that are involved in this build. A lot of guys worked on this, and it's been awesome working with everybody. And it has been frustrating at times for everybody, just trying to get things to work just right. Not in a bad way, not in a bad way at all. It's been awesome, but a lot of back and forth has happened. And so a huge shout out to Hard Park and Chad over at Hard Park for our chassis, Hooker's Garage for all the powder coating. Mias Racing hooked us up with some parts. Mazz Designs, even though we didn't really use much of Mazz's stuff because we went a totally different direction, we do have some Mazz parts on here, so that's awesome. And I'm going to show you our original concept with the Mazz cheat code chassis that we were going to use. Also some 3Flow 9 Theron over there. Awesome parts, awesome product. Definitely go check that stuff out. We have a bunch of OGRC stuff on this. OGRC really was kind of the first to step in and say, hey, we want to do this project. Let's work on it. And then Reefs came in. So huge shout out to Reefs for the servos. These are some awesome servos. We'll talk about them more as we get into the video. And then we've even got the Furatech stuff. So huge shout out to Furatech and Heli Direct. Those guys have also been super awesome and supportive of this project. And then, of course, Flubber Stuffers, keeping our wheels and tires to the ground. Chris over at Flubber Stuffers has been awesome. We actually had to have multiple sets of flubbers come out because the tires we were using changed. And the reason a lot of stuff changed is because throughout the building of the project, new products came out that were better fit for what we were trying to do. So like tires, new OGRC Pin Comps came out, and we're like, those are what we need for the project. We need those instead of the original tires. That changed our flubs. You know, new Lizard Ultimates came out during this time. So we only had the Pro when we started this, and now the Ultimates have come out. So we're going to run Ultimates on this. And again, just the way the chassis happened, we're going to build some cheat code, double cheat code. It was going to be insane, but we'll get into why we didn't there. And Chad jumped in with Hard Park and said, you know what, I can take care of you. We'll get you something super sick here. So let's just get into this video. I'm just talking here, guys. I just wanted to preface it with how much work and how many of these companies really put a lot of effort into trying to just work with me and get these parts right. And yeah, it's going to be a fun build for sure. Let's get into it, I guess. Psh. Sorry, before we dive real deep into it, I just want to remind everybody to like, subscribe, share, hit that notification bell. It's taken a lot of effort to get as far as we have, and we couldn't have done it without the support of the viewers, guys. All the subscribers out there, and even everyone out there that hasn't subscribed, but that gives us those watch hours and gives us those views and gives us those comments. We love the comments. We try to reply to all the comments. Awesome job, guys. We wouldn't have been able to do this project without the support of everybody that watches. If you want to support more, we've got some swag. You can check it out down in the description below. Also at the very end of the video, we have a little link, and we don't make any money, really, $1 or $2 from each shirt or hoodie sale, but it's really more about showing off your support for the Shop Mini RC. We totally appreciate it. Yeah, I love it. So let's really get into this thing. We're going to start off with the cheat code. Again, this is probably at least 6 months ago when this was shot, and a lot has changed, but I wanted to show what we were originally going to intend on doing, and then moving forward, what we're actually going to finish with. All right, let's get into it. We just got these in, some Flubber Stuffers. These are the TV22s. They're basically the 2s, but they're made for, they're a little wider, I think, is what's going on there, because these OGRCs are a little wider. So these are made for this size tire, and got them in perp, and we're going to throw the Hard Parks on there. And something like this, maybe. We'll see. So I want to show the original kind of test rig that we had set up, because our initial intentions were to basically take 2 chassis and make the 8x8 out of 2 cheat code chassis. And we thought that would be just over the top awesome. 2 double cheat code chassis. You know, it's one of the better chassis on the market. and it just seemed like it would have been super awesome to have kind of a double cheat code. And we even considered doing like a pivot in the middle to help with our limited articulation, because we knew that we were using double deadbolts, and the double deadbolts mean that you don't have a whole lot of travel. There's still a good amount. I mean, you can see here, there's a good amount of flex, even with double deadbolts. But the more we kind of dove into it, and again, we had this rig completely set up and working, but the more we dove into it, the more it just didn't feel right to be using these chassis in the way that we were going to do it. And I was also worried about having to, how we were going to mount the pivot. We can make, an adapter and do all that kind of stuff, but it just kind of seemed like we were forcing it to be something it wasn't really designed to be. And you can even see with the shocks here, right? Our furthest back shock mounting position is not far enough back. We wanted to go even further because we wanted to get this as low as we could, and with as much travel as we could. But it was just, it's not designed to have such, basically deadbolt fronts on the rear of the chassis. And if we were to do rear to rear, there might be some weird angles there. And the more we talked to Joey from Mazz Designs, the more we were like, maybe it's just not going to work. And so a huge shout out to Mazz Designs though for the awesome chassis. They're sick, and we're going to do a cheat code build. It's just not going to work for what we initially wanted. And I just want to make sure I reiterate that the chassis, it's not the chassis. It's not its fault that it didn't want to do what I was trying to force it to do. And again, we could force it. It's just doing a disservice to what this chassis was really designed to be. That's really a high level comp crawler, top of the line design. It's a fantastic chassis. I can't say enough about it. And again, I am excited to build a straight, 4x4 cheat code. It wasn't feeling right the more I messed with it. Again, we could make it happen. It's also an angled skid, and if we did rear to rear, the skid would be angled one way on the front and one way on the back. Or if we were to do front to rear, it just creates more issues because of the way our brackets are going to sit. So we can't really put the easily designed brackets for the pivot point if you were to imagine this coming straight up to the back here. Again, I just didn't want to chop on it and go crazy, so we decided to do something different. Enter Hard Park. OMG. OMG. Huge shout out to Chad over at Hard Park. Killing it. Always killing it. And this is no exception, you guys. These little bits. What are these little bits? Ooh, buddy. But that's not what's important, right? What's important is this guy. Woo, buddy! What is this? Count them. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4. That means 8 wheels on cantilever suspension. We got our double skid plates. We got our rock sliders. This thing feels pretty stiff for how long it is. I mean, that's pretty rigid. The 6 center brace. Oh man, guys, this is going to be awesome. Chad and I spoke a lot, Chad over at Hard Park, about what the best way to approach some of the issues I was having here to get it to really work and look right on an 8x8 chassis frame. And I was kind of against it a little bit at first, but he said, we should really just do cantilever. And I'm like, the more I think about it, the more I think you're right. Because the cantilever definitely helps with clearance issues, helps lower the rig quite a bit. We're able to tuck the axles way up in there. So it gives us a real nice low ride height. And it's just also, how can you not love a dedicated, purpose-built chassis for an 8x8? It's just sick. Just sick. So we're going to get this guy built out. And yeah, we're excited. Huge shout out to Hard Park, guys. Huge shout out. They also did these wheels. We have some wheel faces or beauty rings, if you will, coming in. So that'll be cool. And then we're going to use some different tires. We're going to use the new OGRC Pin Comps. These tires are decent, but they're not sticky enough. We really actually want something just with a larger diameter, and I think the Pin Comps will help. We've got a set right here. So these are what we're going to be using. They're much wider than the Injora Pin Comps. and a little bit smaller diameter. They're 63 by 21, so wider but smaller diameter, and they're cut every other one. A lot of people were cutting the Injoras to take out every other row, and so these are pre-done that way. They also come with dual stage foam, but we're going to be using flubber stuffers. This is what the dual stage foam looks like. It's softer foam on the outside with some stiffer foam on the inside. Great if you don't have flubber stuffers. The fact that they come with these is awesome, especially for the price. But we're going to run the Flub RC slime balls, and yeah, they're larger than the mini pins and smaller than the normal pin comps from Injura. So I think they're right in the perfect, right in that middle ground. And I think they'll look much better on here, having a little bit extra meat on the tire. Kind of makes it look a little cooler. They'll be closer together because there is still quite a bit of space, between the axles, more than we'd like. But going shorter on the links will really limit our articulation. We want to have good articulation, and we could get custom links, but like I said, I don't really want to go too short on the drive shafts and links. Oh, to point that out, another thing, the chassis is slightly, the way it sits, the rear, even with deadbolt links, ends up kind of needing a little bit longer drive shaft. You can see it's just slightly longer. It's just the way that the axle kind of sits with the links once they're in there. And of course you can adjust that stuff here, but we were trying to get it as short as possible, tuck it in and tuck it in. And so it was just, requiring a little bit longer drive shaft there, just to point that out. Anyway, now before we really get into the details of the chassis and building the cantilever and stuff, I just wanted to show you some of the video that I sent back and forth with Chad. We had a lot of back and forth. I mean, it took probably a month to really get it dialed into where we wanted it. He sent me the chassis. I sent him a bunch of measurements and what I was looking for. He sent me the chassis back out. It took a little bit to get that. And then once I got it, I had to kind of test fit things. And again, he didn't know exactly what parts I was going to use. I didn't even know exactly which parts I was going to use. So it was kind of like this back and forth. One of the first issues we had was the servo clearance. The ears of the servo, because we're using a little bit wider servo tray, it basically was hitting on the bolts for the cantilever, so we had to make adjustments there. We ended up widening the chassis by like 2 millimeters, just a little bit. So he had to resend out all new braces and the center truss and all that kind of stuff. So that was a little bit of a back and forth. And we also had to deal with some steering link issues and the ride height. We were trying to figure out the best way to get the ride height with the shocks that we had and the steering links that we were using. The steering links that he had test fit on had the drag link much further to the center of the steering link, whereas mine are all the way on the knuckle because I'm using the 3-flow 9s. And so the fact that the steering link attaches at the knuckle and the drag link is attached on top of that knuckle causes it to hit on the cantilever portion of the suspension. So we had to make some adjustments there and try to figure out the best way to handle it. And to a degree, we just decided, well, we'll just deal with it not having maximum travel through there, and we'll put some stops on the shock potentially. So we're still kind of looking at that, and we'll tweak that later, but it's much better. I had to make a little bit of trimming on the cantilever bracket, the little triangle bracket, and then on the back of the drag link. We also have the new pin comps that came in. So once I got the new pin comps in, now I was able to fit the tire size, and we decided he had one more round of pieces that he needed to send back out. So I asked him if while doing that, he could send me some new sliders. Actually, he had to remake the sliders because the sliders we were using, the maximum length of a 1.4 bolt is like 12 millimeters. And you can find some longer, but they're much harder to find. And I think they're actually Phillips heads, the ones that are longer than 12 millimeters. And so once we widened the chassis, we realized that the 12 millimeter bolts would no longer reach through the sliders into the skid plate holding on the links. The upper links were just not going to have the bolt fit all the way through to the center skids. So we had to redesign the skids. And when he was doing that, I asked him if he could also kind of notch them out to fit our larger tires. Anyway, all right, let me show you the cantilever stuff. We'll go and do that now. Alrighty, guys. So here's our chassis after some modifications and back and forth like we just talked about. We've got it wider now by about 2 millimeters. I think the chassis is 35 millimeters, or was 35 millimeters total. And now we're looking at 37. Yeah, essentially 37. And yeah, so I'll show you kind of here what I was talking about. You can see that there's a little bit of gap there. And then this side, we have our spacers in there. So we had to do some spacers on the skids and lengthen all of our braces here. And our center truss had to get widened. And when we widened this, it gave us an extra millimeter here, which caused our screw to not go all the way in. So we redesigned these here, and they're a little bit more countersunk, which allows the screw to go all the way through. Actually, these are countersunk all the way. So you have your screws here, and then these are sunk all the way down so that we can get our screw all the way in. Actually, it's these ones. Sorry, these ones here for our upper links. Okay, pretty sweet. We're going to go ahead and build the rest of our cantilever setup here. These are the shocks we're using. They're some OGRC shocks. They're not oil filled or anything crazy. We may end up switching to oil filled at some point. We just need to make sure they're this length. They have full compression here. Once we have our axle hooked up though, you'll see that it does have, we have to limit it just because of the way our steering links are, at least on the fronts and the rears. The middle two axles should be able to compress completely. We'll see when we get there. I'm not overly worried about it. It's got plenty of travel for what we're looking for, so we're happy there. Also, our notched out skids for our OGRCs. Pin comps. All right, so we're going to go ahead and build each one of these and get it together. Chad was super awesome and sent along an entire extra set for cantilever setup, just in case one bent or broke or we lost parts. Very cool. It's got the bearing and the little bracket here, the cantilever bracket, and the bushing and spacer and screws and all that cool stuff, plus all of our little parts here. Each one of our little shock, I don't know what you want to call them, links. I guess it's kind of a link, right? And yeah, all the stuff. So it's just an awesome, awesome job from Hardpart, guys. Awesome job. Check them out for sure. Just a little tip when doing these little ball joints, especially the ones that have the larger side on one side, right? Put them on your driver like this, and then they're super easy to just put them on, just like that. I mean, you can even just like kind of press them on the table, like this. Just kind of, whoop. So that's an easy way to do it too. Whoop. And of course you can do it on the other side as well. It's not as easy to just snap it on the table, but definitely an easy way to do it versus trying to hold it with your hands. And we'll just push it right on. All right, we're gonna finish and we'll be back.
A few moments later.
All right, we got all of our links and our shocks pivot balled up with their O-rings. Remember, on any open side, as for an example here, the shock is on the, this side is the open side. You want to make sure that your larger edge of the pivot ball, right? Some pivot balls have a larger side that will not let the shock fall through. So even if the O-rings completely rotted out, the shock still couldn't pull through that brass pivot ball. You want to make sure that the exposed side is the side on the outside. That way, no matter what, it's not coming off, O-rings or not. And then kind of same situation here, right? So anytime you have the ability to put that larger side towards the outside, you definitely should. All right, we're gonna go ahead and get all these mounted on, and yeah, we'll be done. Something kind of unexpected here. The ball joints, this brass lip here and here, they're slightly thicker than what Chad had originally used. So he kind of just used stock shocks, and they were going to pop right onto these. So these have a little bit thinner wall, but these are a little thicker. So what that means is our screws that we're using and the amount of space we have between the chassis and the pivot here, the bracket, the cantilever bracket, our screw doesn't show through. I don't know if you can see that. There you go. You can see our screw is barely showing through, and you can say, well, use a longer screw, but then what happens is it rubs on the chassis. So we have to take these brass pieces in just a little bit, and we did it here. Just take it in just a little bit and take it in just a little bit. Might do a little extra on that one, but it's fine. But basically take these brass ends in with the Dremel, and that'll give us enough to get our nut onto our bolt there and not rub on our chassis, okay? So we're good there. You can see on these ones, same thing. These ones are a little narrow down as well. So we're just going through and we're dremeling all of our little brass ball ends or pivot balls down just a little bit, just to make some clearance. And there you go. Now you can see, got room for our nut on the end. That's all it took. Alrighty, kids, look what we got here. Everything all on the chassis. We got all 8 of our shocks. They're all smooth. All of our suspension links here. Well, they're not really suspension links. I mean, they are. They're shock links, I guess. Those are going to connect to our axles. We got our proper skid plates in. Nothing's rubbing on the chassis. It's looking good. We are excited. So now we just got to build up those axles. Build up the axles, and then we'll get them installed on the chassis. Yeah, buddy. So this guy's over 15 inches long, and it's still that rigid. Even being narrow, super rigid. We are super happy with it. Let's get our axles built now. The things we do for our tiny trucks. I'm stuck in traffic right now. We drove, it's going to be an hour-and-a-half round trip to pick up the powder coat parts from Hooker's Garage. So much traffic lately. It's just bumper to bumper the whole way. Crazy. We finally got some movement. It's not even rush hour. That's the crazy thing. It's only like 3 o'clock, 2:30. It's tons of traffic. Tons of traffic. All right, we're finally home with our powder-coated goodies from Hooker's Garage. Some spray paint that we're going to be doing a power wagon in. And then, of course, flowers for the wife for, supporting us in our endeavors with the mini RCs. So let's check this stuff out. I'm super excited. And let's finally get this build going. All right, so these are the axles we're going to use. These are kind of white labeled axles, but these ones specifically are from OGRC. But a couple other companies have them made for them, and they're the exact same. Some come with black ends. These ones came with the purples, but we're switching all that out to brass anyway. So I'll show you what we're doing there. So here are all the axle goodies. We've got the brass knuckles and covers. These are from Mazz Designs. Mazz got a bunch of these in a while ago, and so we snagged some up. We had to snag up a lot of them. They also came with diff covers, but unfortunately we're not using those diff covers. We're going to be using, well, not unfortunately, but fortunately, we're going to be using these diff covers. This is the 3Flow 9. This right here, bam. This is for a different truck, but 3Flow 9 makes all kinds of awesome front skids and link risers and other stuff like that. We would be using the rear link risers if we had rear axles on this build, but we don't. They're all front axles, so they all get front skids. The servo tray is also an OGRC servo tray, and then the steering links are just the stock steering links that come with these axles. And another OGRC drive shaft end. We're going to be using, obviously, both ends, but this is the axle end. So we're going to go ahead and throw this guy together, and then do it 3 more times. And I forgot, we got these. So these are some CVDs. Actually, these are universals. Universals. New axles, because these are the dog bone axles, and they're not so good. So we got some Mazz Racing axles for these, axle shafts for these axles. And we're going to throw those guys in, along with these bearings. So that'll make it a lot smoother and make the steering a lot better. And hopefully give us a little bit better durability. No binding. Should be pretty slick. Super excited to throw these in, but again, we had to do it on 4 sets of axles. First things first on this guy, we're gonna have to pull off our knuckles, which means pulling out our axle shafts. Don't lose your little bushings here. That would be bad. Okay, so there's our dog bones and our C-cups. This guy here is getting replaced. Kind of tight. There we go. So these guys are getting replaced with these guys. And we like these nylon axles because they slide nice and smooth right over the rocks. Obviously the knuckles here we want in brass for that extra weight. But you wouldn't want to do like a whole brass axle housing. You could. It's tons of extra weight, but then it also just sticks on rocks. And so does aluminum. But one way you could fix that if you did do brass is to powder coat it. And that's actually what we've got going on here, right? Because these were brass. We had these powder coated. And again, they're powder coated by Hooker's Garage. So they're doing a they did us a favor here for sure, because they're not really doing RC stuff anymore. But if you're doing a very, very, very special project, then reach out to them, and maybe Hooker's Garage can hook you up by doing some powder coating for you. Now I'm going to tell you right now, it is not cheap. Powder coating anything is not cheap, and there's nobody out there that does the tiny truck parts. I mean, we've got a bunch of these guys all powder coated, like 200 plus little screws for the wheels and tires. It's crazy. But yeah, so it's a lot of work to powder coat these guys, and so it does cost a pretty penny, but in the end, you end up with a very nice product. Super smooth, slick. It's almost like a plastic coating, which just helps it slide over rocks. Like, it definitely is better than raw brass, even better than just plastic, you know. It's super good. Now, it will wear over time, probably. If you're just doing a lot of crawling, obviously, just like anything, you're going to get wear on there, but I'll tell you what, it is quality work for sure. All right, we're going to keep getting this guy apart. All right, we got both of our knuckles out, all of our axle shafts out. We're just going to go ahead and pull these guys apart now, the portal housings. Just like so. Got to pop our bearings out. One of the easiest way to get bearings out is to stick the thing that usually goes into that bearing into it and then just kind of work it out. Trying to use a driver or flathead screwdriver, stuff like that, can prove to be difficult sometimes, and you can damage the bearing. So when you have a bearing like that you can't just push through, try using the part that goes in there. And for these bearings, we'll just go ahead and push these guys out. Okay. We'll do the same thing over here. And then our portal cover. So we're going to keep these guys. Those are ones we're using here. See, easy peasy. Go ahead and throw it into here. One of the other things about powder coating is it does add a little bit of thickness to the parts. So you have to prep the parts by basically media blasting them down and making sure that you don't actually have that buildup affect your tolerances, right? Because if they do, you end up with some binding. And it's very difficult to, you got to media blast it a lot. And even then, it's not going to always do it. And I don't know if you can see here, but this guy here looks like it's not sitting quite as flush as we need it to. So I'm almost kind of worried that we may need to take these down just a tad. So you can see there's a little bit of a gap there. It's just barely there. I mean, once you screw it in, it almost goes away. But that means that there's some binding happening in our portals. And again, you don't want there to be any binding in your portals at all. It's basically the bearings are getting bound up because they're being compressed because they're just too tight. So we're going to have to go through every single one of these portal housings and caps, the outside covers, and we're going to have to basically clean them out. Now, this is no fault of anybody except us because we wanted these powder coated. There's no real way to get them powder coated and media blasted enough to make it perfect. So we're just going to go through and we're going to use an X-Acto kind of that has a blunted tip. And we're just going to scrape out all the powder coating, get it down to the brass and clean it up. Also, to be fair, for all we know, these already, the tolerances were not 100% perfect. There's a potential that that's the case and that the bearings were not sitting flush even before the powder coating. So we're just going to take it down until our bearings start to sit flush. And once there's no more binding and we're able to tighten our screws all the way down and there's no slop, you don't want to take out so much that there's slop, but we'll be test fitting it over and over and making sure that there is no binding or slop. So we'll hit that perfect balance and we should be good. We have to do this inside here too, because my guess is it's going to be the same way. And it'll bind on the turning when the knuckle's trying to turn because it's pushing the bearing too far into the CVD here with the universal. So we're just going to clean this out a little until we can see brass, and then we'll test fit and test fit and test fit. Yeah, and this little guy here definitely needs cleaned out right in here. So we'll come back. We've got to do 8 of these and 8 of these. And it's going to take us a bit.
More moments later.
So I'm going to be honest, that was absolutely horrible and excruciating. But I got them all scraped out and all cleaned up where all the bearings are going to sit. And it will definitely not bind now. You know, when they powder coat this stuff, they have to plug every single threaded hole to make sure that it's not going to get powder coat in there, or even the media stuff. So they plug every hole, and every screw that gets powder coated, you got to cover the threads. So it is a tedious task. So I don't expect much less when it comes to us getting it together and getting things working correctly and clean. So it is what it is, but it's going to look great, and they're going to be nice and smooth. We also have some ball diff grease here from our Mini Zs. We need to get some lithium grease, I think, but it doesn't really matter as long as you've got a little bit of some sort of consistency. Not super thin, right? Like you're not going to run oil. You want to run actual grease. So we're going to throw some grease in here and get them moving nice and smooth. Get them back together. All right, we'll get that gear all greased up. I'm going to throw it into here. Their other gear. Oh no. Alrighty. Get our bearing in there. Let's go ahead and get our grease nice and mixed in. Feels smooth. We won't know until we're completely tight. Make sure there's no binding, but we should be good here. Pull this out and just double check. Make sure our grease is nice and spread out. Yeah, we're good, we're good. Okay. Get our screws back in. And we need to Loctite these guys. So we will get some Loctite and we will get our screws in and we will be back. Oh yeah, all Loctited up, tightened down, nice and smooth. Doesn't seem like there's much play, other than portals having a little bit of play in them anyway. You know, you can't really do portals without having a little bit of the gear play, but there's no like play in the axle shaft here. Just a little tiny bit. You can kind of see that. Just a tiny bit there, but that's fine. We didn't introduce anything that wasn't already there. Feels smooth though, so I dig that. All right, we're gonna get the other 7 of these all done and get this axle together, and we'll be moving on. Feels nice and smooth. Get our knuckles back in. Now we're going to want to Loctite these two, but we've got to be careful not to get any Loctite on the nylon axle housing right here. If we do get Loctite on there, it could cause that axle housing on the black portion right here. If we get Loctite in there, it could cause it to degrade. So we need to be careful. We don't want to overdo it, just a little bit. And then we can stick our screw through and just try to make sure we go straight into the knuckle and not get Loctite on there. Okay. Nice and smooth. Got our other bushing in there. Oh shit, you know what? Oh, we don't want Loctite on that one, because that's going into the plastic. Good thing I didn't go all the way in there. Let's check. Yeah, we're good. Just be sure here. Yeah. All right, we're good. Yeah, we don't want Loctite on there. We'll use a different screw even, because that is going into plastic. It doesn't need Loctite. So we're a little tight here. I wonder if we need to take a little bit more off this inner bearing, because we're tight when we turn. It feels like it's kind of binding. So I think we're going to try to pull these back off and go a little deeper on this bearing here. All right, so it feels a little better there. We got just one side in. We won't know until we get this side also in, but we did take it down quite a bit more. Should be good. Let's get this guy in. All right, nice and snug, don't over tighten. I mean, it's better. Still feels like it's got a little bit of tightness in there, but it definitely feels better. Could be the way the knuckle and C-hub is angled a little bit. Interesting. I'm going to throw the knuckle on this side without the axle in there, and I want to see if it is doing the same thing. We'll try that up real quick. All right, well, this C-hub and knuckle seems fine, right? Whereas this one with the axle in it, it has resistance as we turn, and I'm thinking it's going to have something to do with the bearing in there. It just needs a little bit more space to let this axle kind of float just a little bit. So we're gonna take this in a little further. We'll probably take this one in a little further as well, just so we don't have to pull it back off. But it looks like what's happening there. You can see it. So we took the bearing seat down quite a bit, and it still seemed like it was hitting. Well, not hitting, but like had resistance at full lock, a lot more than with nothing in there. And here you can see it's a lot better. Actually, we went full lock there. Part of it was restriction of the CVD, right? At a certain turn, that's like the max it'll go, right there. But if I turn a little further, it'll go all the way. So part of it is that the max turn of the universal. The other part is we ended up taking this inner bearing out, and that inner bearing being removed allows that axle to sit in just a little further, and as you turn, it's able to move just a little bit, right? This axle shaft, it's not sitting real tight on the bearing, and so it allows it just to move a little bit. Now, we need to be careful with that because it could potentially cause broken axles or other weird bindings. So we're going to watch it as we run it and just kind of keep an eye. We don't want the axle getting bent or anything, but I remember seeing somewhere people were pulling this inner bearing out when they changed over to CVDs or universals, and that's what we did, and it seems to have helped a lot. Now, we're going to have to make sure that we set our endpoints and be very careful until we have our endpoints set, because if we go full lock without endpoints, it could bind up real bad. So we're going to watch that very carefully, but I'm pulling this inner bearing out, and we'll see how that goes. So one way we kind of test axles sometimes is we'll throw it on a Dremel on the lowest setting, or even a drill if we want to be real careful. But this allows us to kind of see what things feel like at speed. And now, mind you, we're not sitting on the drive shaft perfectly, so it's got a little vibration to it, but it does allow us to kind of test and feel just how bad it bumps or doesn't bump. And these actually feel pretty good. You can see that. You just got to be careful doing this. You don't want to break anything. You want to be on the low setting. This side's bumping a little more than this side, but we're probably not going to have our turn radius that much. So yeah, we're good. We'll pull this guy off and let's get our diff cover on there. So there's our worm gear and ring. It seems pretty dry. We're going to throw some of this grease in there. Try to help that out just a little bit, because that is super dry. So we can just pull this guy out. I think grease this up pretty good here. Okay, seems all right now. Throw a little on our worm gear as well. All right, much better. Go ahead and put our diff cover on. Our new bearing. These 3Flow9 flow skids are super awesome. We absolutely love them. We run them on a couple different rigs. They just help when you get rocks right on the center of your diff. You can hit lines you wouldn't normally hit. Kind of just pushes the diff out of the way. It's Delrin. These are Delrin, and they come in a bunch of different colors. So you can order just a straight black one, or you can get it done up in a color that matches your rig's theme, kind of like we did, the red. And you know, we actually took the Delrin skid and had Hooker's Garage match it as best as we could, which I mean, it's really close. But we based all of our red off of the 3Flow 9 skid because I really dug that kind of darker tone. I don't know if it conveys in the video very well, but in person, it's kind of a darker, like blood red. And I think the red we used was just called wagon red. Like, yeah, I think it was just wagon red or something like that. I'll have to look it up. All right. Still nice and smooth. I'm digging it. Awesome, awesome. Then we're going to do our servo tray. Go ahead and get our little servo ears on. Definitely going to Loctite those, get our servo tray on, and our steering links, and I think we're good there, right? We'll be good. Bam. All done. Looking good. Yeah, still nice and smooth in there. Pretty sweet. I'm digging it. Again, brass, brass, brass. Brass diff cover with the flow skid. It's got some good weight to it. We're going to have 4 of these guys. We have 2 different OGRC servo trays. We have a brass and an aluminum. And because we got them powder coated, I'm not sure which is which. I can kind of tell from the holes here. But we're just going to weigh them just to make sure we know. We're going to do 2 brass on the front and then 2 aluminum on the rear. So this one's the 5. Looks like this was a 13. So you can see there's a pretty good weight difference there. More than double. So if you want the good brass on the front, low, pretty low COG, and unsprung, brass servo tray is definitely a good way to go. So that's going to give us a little bit more forward bias. We're going to have essentially 8 grams extra on the front 2 axles over the rear. Well, more than 8 grams because it's times 2. So we'll have 16 extra grams towards the front because both the front axles are going to be brass and both the rear axles are going to be aluminum. Anyway, all right, we're going to go ahead and get these on here. We're going to get our servos on here. You can already see we got some links. We're just kind of test fitting stuff. Again, they're deadbolt front links, upper and lower, and these are OGRC links with the Mazz design knuckles, and then Mias Racing CVDs or universals in there, and the 3Flow 9 flow skid on all 4 in the red Delrin, pretty slick, and then these drive shafts are also OGRC. So we're going to go ahead and put our steering links on. We've got these, basically the OGRC stock links that came with the nylon portals. Those are going to be on our inner axles. So when you have your front axle, your next axle is going to be this, then the next axle is going to be this, and then the rear axle is going to be running the 3Flow 9 stuff. So we got some 3Flow 9, the roller bearing links. So we get all of our links on. This is how we're going to have it set up. Basically, these are brass servo trays, and then the outsides, the front and the rear, are going to be running the 3Flow 9 roller bearings. There are 2 different kinds of 3Flow 9 roller bearing links. One is a 6 millimeter, which is a larger diameter and less bearings, and the other is a 5 millimeter. You can see the difference there. Pretty sweet. I love the option. If you want a little bit more weight, a little less, I guess, gaps, fewer gaps, then you go with the larger, as long as you've got clearance, because they are larger diameter, and hopefully we're good here. Or you can go with the smaller, more bearings. Actually, I don't know which one weighs more, now that I think about it. Let's do a quick weigh here. I'm kind of curious, actually. So these are the 5 millimeters. 5.15 versus, yeah, the bigger ones are heavier, 6.09. So not a huge difference, just like a gram. Just wasn't sure if because there's more bearings it could potentially weigh more, but no, it's the diameter definitely increases the weight. So we're going to have the larger diameter on the front and the smaller diameter on the rear, and that'll give us even just a little bit more weight bias to the front. Again, all things being equal, we're trying to get more weight bias on the front without changing up too much, right? Just brass servo trays, the roller bearing link. We put skids on the insides and on the rear. So there's brass diff covers on all four. If we really wanted to, we could pull off the skids and brass diff covers on the rear here, on the rear two axles. That would give us even more front bias, but we want the skids. You know, we want skids on each axle for sure. Yeah, let's go ahead and get these roller bearing links installed. We've already got our, basically stock links. They're not stock, but the ones that came with, they're aluminum. We have those links already installed, but we need to get our roller bearings in, and then our servos will go in. We're all installed. These are the 5 or 6 millimeters, and then these guys are the 5 millimeters. Seems good. Everything's nice and smooth. Now we just got to do our servos. Oh, we only used one O-ring here, the O-ring in the middle. They give you 2 O-rings or 3 O-rings total, one for here, here, and here. But we've opted to not use those bottom O-rings. I'm okay with a little bit of play here. I just want to make sure there's no binding, and the play is so minimal. So we're good. If I add the O-rings, because of the angle of the knuckles, these knuckles are actually kind of angled. They end up having a lot of resistance on them, and so I'm trying to reduce that right now. So I'm okay with, I'd rather have a little bit of play than too much binding. But your knuckles may want these, depending on how your knuckles sit. You may end up wanting those O-rings, so just be aware that's what those are for. And now we are on to the Reefs. We're using the 179 Smart Micros, and we're going to go ahead and get these guys installed. I'm going to show you all the electronic stuff. We have that all laid out in a separate video, so we'll show that right after this install. And it's basically showing how we're doing the double brushless with the 4 servos. We're going to have to trim these down. You can see here, I've already got one trimmed down, only using the 3rd hole. And yeah, these servos are super, super sweet. They're fully programmable, which is a big reason why we got them. We wanted to be able to reverse the steering on the rear, obviously, and because they're sitting opposites, whatever. The way they're going to be wired, the front and the rear, not the rear of the truck, but the rear axles, right? So if you've got one servo facing this way and one servo facing this way, and they're on the axles like this, and they're tied together, right, using like a Y splitter, so they're both going into the same channel, they're both going into channel 1, then when I turn left, the front's going to go left, but the rear is going to go right, which would make it basically mirror, right, which is not what we want, because then this portion's not turning like it's supposed to, right? Like if it goes like that, then this is trying to spin. We still have a rear of a truck. So we actually want the front 2 axles to crab walk, right? So we crab this way, crab that way, and then the rears are going to do the same thing, but opposite, or crab, or whatever, however we do it between the front and the rear. But these are going to be basically Y splittered together into channel 1, which means we need to be able to reverse this servo so that it matches this servo to crab walk on the front, and then same on the rear. Anyway, we're going to get these installed, then we'll do the electronics. All right. Now, just so you know, Reefs does have shorter servo horns. We just got these a very long time ago. Again, this project, like I said, almost 8 months in the making. The first stuff we got was some of the OGRC parts and the axles, and then we got the servos. So it's been quite a while. Reefs has been patiently waiting for this project to get done. And yeah, I greatly appreciate their help with this. Yeah, this has been awesome. And you know what I'm a huge fan of? The fact that these are hex heads. Let's go. Finally, hex head screws. More manufacturers need to do that for their servos. Anyway, we should be good here. We're going to get these guys in. All right, looking good. Got all 4 servos in, all 4 axles and links set up. Got our brass servos, servo mounts up here. Aluminum's in the back. All the red you see, everything that's red here is powder coated. It's all powder coated by Hooker's Garage, with the exception of the skid, right? Like I said before, we tried to match the powder coat off the skid. When we started this project, these skids did not come in color, and then 3Flow 9 released them in color, and I'm like, I gotta get them in color now. So we went and got the color. The last thing we ended up doing was powder coating everything. That was kind of the last thing we were really waiting for, other than some wheel barrels that we still don't actually have, but we'll have them by the end of the video. They should be here like literally today or tomorrow. For our hard park wheels, we got some red inners here. We could have powder coated them. I didn't really want to powder coat anything on the wheels except this, the bolts here, and we'll do the wheels here separately, but we do have some inners coming. So once we get those, we'll do that video, and that'll be towards the end of this video. Anyway, yeah, so we're good to go here. Pretty sweet. So now I figured I'd do a little demo of how we're going to set up our electronics on this beast. We're using Lizard Pros right now, and in the little video I'll show next, but we're probably going to end up using the Ultimates like I mentioned earlier. We do have 2 Ultimates sitting, so we'll be using those, but this video was filmed before the Ultimates were even out, so let's check that out. So here's our electronics setup. This is the heart, the muscle, the core, and yeah, this is how we're running it. We're going to run double stock V1s on a V1 controller, at least for now. We'll probably change it up at some point, I'm sure, but this is fun. We paired both of them to the transmitter, and you can do that. You just basically pair it up, and then you can turn that one off and pair it up, and you're good to go. And actually, I think both of these paired without having to turn either one off. We just powered them up, and for some reason, they just both paired. We turned them on with this in bind mode, and they bound up. So, but I know for sure if you turn one off, if you're having issues and you turn one off and you bind the other one, when you turn them both on, they'll both be bound to one transmitter. So we're going to probably run 3S on these as well, but for now we're just going to run some stock batteries. We're running the Lizard Pros into our Micro Komodos. You can see we've got them both running. Now, there's some stuff you have to do, and we'll walk through that in a minute, to get these to work correctly together in sync. And we're going to do some cool stuff with this. We've also got our Reefs 179 micros. We have 4 of them for our 8-wheel steering. There's our front, and then we're just going to be using channel 3 for our rear. So it's not going to be fully proportional. We could try to hook up, actually, hold on. So we have this Baston's quad steer module. And we do have a video where we kind of talk about it over here when we talk about our 4-wheel steering setup. But this guy allows you to basically run 4-wheel steering off of a single channel if you wanted. And you get your front and your rear steer. Or you can have it also use your channel 3, so you can plug a channel 3 in. That way the channel 3 will let you switch between your crab walk, your mirrored, your front only, and your rear only. But if you don't use a channel 3, if you say you only have a 2-channel remote, you can use steering to do it. So you like turn full left, full right, full left, full right. You do it like 3 times within a certain amount of period. I think it's 3 times. And then it'll switch modes, and you do it again, you'll switch modes. So that's not really ideal, but the channel 3 change is pretty good. It lets you cycle through the different modes. Now, the only problem or concern that I have with using this right now is that we're doing 2 receivers, 2 ESCs. So if we're to run our channel 3 through 1 and the other through 1, I'm not sure how that would work. I guess we could run them both off of just the front receiver. That would probably work. Let's go ahead and try that. Let me go ahead and hook it up. We'll try that. All right, so I've got our channel 1 and channel 2 hooked up, and then our rear, this is going to be our rear, and this is our front hooked up. And let's go ahead and power that on. Okay, our throttle's working. Our steering, however, is, oh, there we go. Okay. Took a second to power up. One of the reasons I wanted to kind of separate these out with 2 ESCs is so that we could run our front servos on one ESC receiver and battery and the rears on another from a power standpoint. Because these guys, not that they pull a ton of power, but I just felt like keeping them separated on single batteries would help. It would help us also drain our batteries more equally, things of that nature. So let's see. So we can see there. So one of these servos, you haven't probably noticed, maybe did. These are opposite, right? So you can see these 3 are all the same, and this first one is actually going opposite. The reason for that is, and one of the reasons we use the Reef 179s, is you can go in and hook these to a computer, literally a USB, you plug it into the USB, and you can program the whole thing. You can program your trim, which is one of the reasons we wanted to get these, so that we can make sure we get all of our trim set, because we're not using a high-end radio. I mean, we could use our FlySky, our Noble, or use an Avatar or something like that, but we wanted to use this, and we just felt like it'd be cool to be able to set all this stuff, straight hard in the system, hard to set all those settings. So anyway, you can change the trim, you can change the speed, the servo speed, you can change the endpoints, and you can reverse them. So I really like the idea of being able to reverse them, because once these are in the rig, on the front and rear first two axles, you have to reverse one of them so that they can go the same direction, right? Because all four wheels are going to go the same direction on the front, and then all four on the rear are going to go the same direction. And then it's the front and rear that are going to be opposite. You'll be able to see it better when we get stuff installed, but I just want to talk about it now on here. So we should be able to just change our channel 3 now. Now we're front only. Now we're opposite. Now we're rear only. So that's cool. We can use the bastions like that, front only, front and rear. If you watch, it's kind of confusing, I get it, but watch these three. Don't watch this one. Okay, now they're opposites. Now it's rear only. Oh. And now we're the same. Now we're front only. Wonder if we're kind of browning out because we're pulling too many powers. Anyway, so I think I can try to figure out a way to do it where I split it so that... No, I don't think I can actually. I don't know. Maybe I'll message Bastons and see if it's okay to run this, or especially when we hit 3S, and because we plan on running 3S. We're also kind of twitching here. Got a little twitchiness going on. At least on the fronts. I don't think the backs are twitching too. I wonder if that's the Bastions module. I'm not sure. Anyway, so we're going to experiment a little bit with that. We'll update you along the way. But to start, we're just going to use what we had set up the first time. Front on one, rear on the other, and we'll use our non-proportional. I don't know. The Bastions is kind of cool. Like I said, I just wanted to be able to power these off of this. And I guess we could still power them if we wanted to split our power cable and run our power here. That could work. That's going to take some wiring, but trying to keep it as simple as possible. So, all right, let's get back to this. All right, so I want to walk through the app just a little bit here because it is very important to be able to set these up in a way that works. We actually went through and already kind of did everything. Obviously, they're spinning at the same speed. When we first got them, they were on different firmwares. This one had drag brake because of the firmware, and this one didn't, even though the settings were the same. And there were just a lot of inconsistencies between the two, and I was concerned, like, maybe the motor is different than that in some regard, because KVs can change between motors. Anyway, we got it all set up. It was basically the update. You want to make sure you're 100% updated on both. Obviously, they need to be equal. And then we renamed them. It's kind of hard to see, but one is front and one is rear. So we'll just look at the front for now. This will allow us to do like a simulated dig where we can, or overdrive, where we can slow down the rear or speed up the front independently since the motor is separate. One of the other things that we had to set up to make sure they were running equally, because even after we updated the firmware, we were having issues, is our throttle calibration, basically our dead zone and our max throttle, max reverse. And we actually calibrated them together. So I had two phones, and both phones were running the app. One was connected to the front, one was connected to the rear, and then I hit calibrate on both, and they both say set neutral. I say okay on both. Says set throttle, then I pull the throttle and hit okay on both. Then it says they beep. Then they say set reverse, so I hit the reverse, hit okay on both, and it fully set them both. And I tried calibrating them separately, but the issue was just minor variations in how hard I pulled it, or just what it would, the signal the transmitter was putting out caused them to slightly be different. One would be like -1 and the other one would say +1, and they'd just barely be off. And that was actually causing a major issue. So when I calibrated them both at the same time with the same throttle pull, same reverse pull, same 0 point, it actually worked. So I had to have two phones with the app to do that. And now we're totally good. They move exactly at the same speed, and they have the same exact response, which is awesome. Which means that now I can go through and I can, once they're in the rig, I can go through and set, if I want to have a little more drag brake on the rear, any of the settings I can set separately for the rear. So things like the max reverse, max forward, especially max forward, right? I can lessen that just a little bit so that I have a overdrive in the front or an underdrive in the rear. Same with drag brake. I can give the rear more drag brake if I wanted for some reason. It's going to be pretty sweet. And then same with like punch, right? I'm going to be able to do punch and neutral brake and all that kind of stuff independently front and rear. I can even set my throttle curve independent for the front and the rear. So that's going to be pretty sweet. I'm definitely digging that. We will probably set up the front to just kind of how we want to drive normally, just a normal drive, and then we'll adjust the rear so that we can like take out or add drag, take out or add throttle, basically give it an underdrive. That way we still have, when we can set everything to max on the front. Because if we did it the other way, if we did everything maxed on the rear, exactly how we want it set up on the rear, then we could never do a faster front, right? We could never do overdrive in the front. So that'll give us the ability to overdrive the front and underdrive the rear. And then when we want, we can go ahead and just put it back to normal and they can be totally equal. One thing that would be really cool with the FearTech app would be able to set, have like a drop down where you can have settings that are maybe they're saved to the phone, but you can just have a configuration and then I can swap quickly, just hit the drop down. I don't know, maybe in here or, well, let's see, maybe like in here, I could choose, you can save your configuration. That way I could have an underdrive configuration and switch it quickly without having to go through and change each setting. I could go through and just change it to a saved setting. So that would be a cool feature if they wanted to add something awesome to the app. Basically something that saves all your settings and a drop down on the phone. It's a phone setting set up. So if you have like 5 or 6 cars and you save a setting, you can actually load that setting for a different car. That would be very cool. That would have been nice here because then I could mirror them very easily, right? Just use the same setting on both the front and the rear. Totally good. Anyway, all right, so we've got the electronics. You've seen how that's kind of set up and working. I guess from here, we'll go ahead and get it installed in the rig. I'd like to show how you do the USB setup on one of these, so we'll show that. And yeah. All right, we're going to try some craziness here. We've got our bastions plugged into our channel 1 and our channel 3, just like you're supposed to. So basically the bastions is getting power from this receiver and signal from this receiver for left, right, and our rear steer switching. It's outputting our full front here with power and everything that goes over to here. Okay. So our full front is powering these two. And then our rear, we're only sending signal to these two. And then our power is coming from this setup. So this receiver and this battery. So I'm hoping we don't fry anything. The only thing that's crossing is this signal from here, our signal wire. This black wire doesn't mean anything. It's just an extra because of the cable I had. But we're plugged in our red wire, which is our signal for our rear steer. Because normally you'd plug the whole rear steer into this. So you'd have this plug going here. But instead we just have the signal going there and then our power from here. Should work. There shouldn't be any crossover in power. Like we're not double powering anything. Again, these are being powered strictly from this receiver and battery and ESC. And these are being powered strictly from this one. But we are crossing signal from here, from the bastions really, our signal to these two. All right, so let's pray it works. Turn it on. And turn it on. No smoke. Our throttles are working. Our front is working. Our rear is not working at all. These two. They should have power. Yeah, I don't know why we're not getting, maybe we're not being powered here. Is our connection not good? We have signal. I guess it doesn't work quite like I thought it did. I don't know. All right, so we reached out to Bastions and asked them what their thoughts were on our setup. And they kind of, he was kind of like, I'm not going to ask what you're trying to do, but here's your solution. So what you have to do is you have to run a negative to the second receiver. We're going to power the rear servos to the bastions. And so we ran our power here to our servos. And then our signal we have to run from the bastions because it's actually this receiver signal, not the power, that's going to be signaling these to move because it's running through the bastions. So when we ran our signal, which is this red wire, to our signal on our servo, it wasn't working. We reached out and he said, you need to have a ground. So we're going to run our ground to here. So now we have a ground and signal wires from here to the bastions, and then straight power, ground, and positive to the servo. So hoping it doesn't fry. He said it would work, so we're trusting it's going to work. Let's go ahead and turn it on. We'll turn on this side. Okay. Motor's working. Steering is not, oddly. Oh, you know what? Odd. Steering is not working. I wonder if it's because we need to have both on. Let's go ahead and turn on this guy. Hopefully nothing fries. I don't see any smoke yet. Both motors are working. Steering is not working. All right, let's go ahead and pull out this guy here. I'm going to reset these. Okay. Now it's working. And that's working. Let's go ahead and plug this in. Okay, interesting. I wonder what happened there. So now they're all working. That's good. Maybe it just, maybe the bastions just didn't power up. All right. Nice. Our channel 3 is now working. So you can see we have rear only, rear and front only, and opposites. Nice, guys. Awesome. It worked. And then, of course, our motors are still working. All right, so I'm going to turn these off. And we're going to turn it back on again because I wonder if I have to like replug this in every time. That'd be weird. Nope, we're working. Must have just been something goofy going on the first time. Awesome. Awesome. So now we can use this module. And you know what just came out? The new SCX, well, AX24. And it has new electronics that have the crab steer and mirrored steer all built in to the electronics. If we get one of those in our hands, we may try using that receiver and transmitter combo. But then we'd have to get two receivers. I don't know yet. I don't know. But it looks interesting. I just, yeah, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. It looks interesting. When I saw that, this was the first thing I thought of for the project. So, all right. Anyway, let's move on. Here's our electronics. Pretty sweet. I'm going to show you how we do the servos now. And we'll hook this into the USB on the computer, and I'll show you all the different settings. So the first thing you're going to want to do is download the software, then plug in your USB dongle, and you'll get this screen here. Then you can click read. Sometimes it just automatically pulls it, but you can click read and pull the most recent information. Then click, we're going to just click inversion because that's the only thing we want to do right now is invert the servo. And then you can click write, and that'll write it back to the servo. Now there's all these other parameters in here, and you can check that stuff out as we go, but we're just going to go ahead and use inversion for now. You can come back later and mess with these settings, but not in this video. You can also save all of the settings to a file on your computer, as well as open your previously saved. They have a bunch of files for different servos if you want to switch them over to winches and whatnot, or put them back to the standard servo. They've got those files on their website. You can also click UPF, which will allow you to update the servo firmware if there's an update for that firmware. And now we get to marry the axles and the chassis. It's going to start looking like a real truck. Well, a real something, right? We're going to go ahead and just mount all of the suspension links first. So pull these guys out. Actually, we're already pretty far out there. Now you might be asking, why we're using plastic skids? And it's because we wanted to make sure that we slide nice and smooth over any rocks. We could have used a brass skid or an aluminum skid, but you know, the stock skids are just fine. And even Mr. Hard Park himself said, hey, just use the plastic skids. That's what we use on our comp rigs. There's no real reason to go brass for sure, because brass will just stick to the rocks. And then the aluminum, you know, if you want the bling, I guess you could do that. Maybe at some point we'll switch them over to aluminum. I don't know. I hadn't really planned on it. I'm cool with the plastic. You can just, you can also shave down this little bump here on there. And that'll get you even a smoother surface. Alrighty, we got all of our links hooked up now. We're going to be doing our shock links next. It's starting to look good though. Okay, now we're just going to connect each one of our cantilever setups to our shock mounting on our axle. We'll be back. So it goes to show, even when you think you've got all the kinks worked out, you forgot about something or didn't test a spot. I assumed that these braces were the same distance. This one happens to be just barely further back, and so our servo hits on it. So we're going to have to move the braces, or maybe just keep them removed. I'm not sure. Here's with it removed. Seems pretty stiff still. Probably not ideal to not have a brace, but we're probably going to run it with no brace there for now. Get the motor in, see how things feel. And then if we need to, we can re-drill some holes and put the brace back in. Plus, I want to see if how the spacing fits and maybe the motors, or if the motor ends up hitting. That'll give us more of an answer of whether we want the brace or not. But we got everything in. Plenty of range. It's kind of hard to show articulation. It's so long, but we've got good articulation. Again, it's nothing crazy. You don't want crazy articulation anyway, but yeah. We're digging it. And now onto the tires and wheels. Like we mentioned, we're going to be using some OGRC Pin Comps. They're the 63x21s. We've got the purple Flub RC TV33s for this tire specifically, and then the Hard Park wheels. Hard Park wheels are amazing from a customization standpoint. You can mix and match so much stuff. And actually here, I'll show you some of what we've got here. Look at all these different wheel faces, guys. Oh my God. Look at that. Look at all these different wheel faces. It's insane. And we're going to end up doing a video on these. And then you got beauty rings. This is what we're going to end up using. They come in titanium and in carbon. Just a ton of different options. And what's really cool about that is you can mix and match stuff. And we'll go much deeper when we get into our video on these guys. But look at that. Line up the holes. Bam. There's a design. And if you want, you just move the holes one. Bam. Totally different look. You can stack them and do all kinds of craziness, but we're going to go with this simple thing. We're just going to use a clear disc. But yeah, how sweet are these? This is so sick. So there's like over 10,000 combinations you could make from the wheels. Like legit. When you take all the different faces, how cool is that? When you consider the different faces, different materials, different inner rings, because they have brass, aluminum, and 3D printed ultralights. And so you can mix those. They've got different color hubs, which we're not even taking into consideration. We're just using the silver ones for that 10,000 number. But then you've got +2, and there are also just the regulars. So 0 offset and +2 offset. So when you consider the offset, the different types of inner rings, the faces, and different materials of faces, there's over 10,000 different combinations of wheel looks and I guess features. So yeah, they're super sick, and they're always coming out with more, which is just awesome. So we'll do a whole video on these things. Make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell so you know when that video goes up. But let's get back into what wheels and tires we're using. While we're doing the motor and transmission stuff, we got this guy. Bam. And these were not part of the original plan, but when he released them, we had to pick some up. So we ended up picking up some red hubs and, well, not hubs, I guess they're barrels. And then there's the hubs. They also were red there. When we ordered these, it said it came with the wheel hubs, but I didn't know they were going to be red. So that's awesome. Oh, look, a little Hard Park keychain. So I don't know yet. I don't know. Maybe it's going to be too much red. Maybe not. It's not quite the exact color that we're using. Close, but not exactly. It's very close. They look so good though. Oh, okay. So we've got to figure out how we want to do this. One thing I want to note. So we've got, this is what we were going to do. I've already got one set up. Spoiler, but look at that. Do you see something there? We had a oops. Look at all these little tiny fine hairline cracks. Now, we didn't over tighten. At least we're 99% sure we didn't over tighten. But what we did do, and we weren't even thinking when we did it, we Loctited all of our little screws because we didn't want to lose our powder coated screws, our Hooker's Garage powder coated screws. So I put a little bit of Loctite on each screw. And I think that Loctite caused the Lexan to crack because when we put them together, they were totally fine. They sat for a couple days. I came back and they were all cracked. So I'm pretty sure that's what happened. Do not put Loctite on these Lexans at all. So I don't know if I want the red. The red barrel will probably be fine, but I don't know about the red hub, right? Like these hubs, do we want them in red? Because that means behind the screws it'll be red. I don't know. We'll put one together and we'll see. All right. So the first thing we did when we were doing our tires is we directioned all of them. So they're all they are directional. Even though the tire itself isn't directional, we marked them as directional so that we know which way to put our flubs in. These are technically called slime balls. These are slime balls. They're made by Flub RC. All right. So these are directional. And the direction they go is you want them to be rolling or rotating kind of with the hooks or the grip going forward. So this is the direction you want them to go. And they have what's called forward propulsion technology. And you can see it kind of, I don't know if it's deform is the right word, but you can see they kind of bunch up in the back. But what that does is it keeps it smooth in the front and it helps push the back and kind of rotate forward, right? So you definitely want them to go like this. So we're going to go ahead and put them in here and make sure they fit well, and they should. We test fitted a whole bunch when we were doing the other tires and wheels, so we should be good here. All right, let's go ahead and do the red. Okay. Oh, wait, did we forget our brass ring? Come on now. Throw our brass ring in. Throw our hub in. Or a barrel. I keep calling it a hub. I mean barrel. All right. I kind of felt bad for Scott over at Hooker's Garage because he had to do all these screws, powder coating for our wheels. It's so much work. So many little screws. But they came out great. We are super, super stoked that he was able to be part of this project, even though he is kind of no longer doing the little trucks. All right, so we're going to work our screws in. Just try to go in a star pattern and then slowly tighten them all down together at the same time. Whatever you do, make sure you don't cross thread anything. Always kind of back the screw out before you go forward again. So we'll kind of turn it back till it clicks in and then we'll screw forward. That way we know we're not cross-threaded. And then work your bead. Make sure you're not tucked in too far. Don't let it come out though. And you'll be golden. If your bead does pop out, you're going to have to back out your screws just a little bit. Give yourself a little more space. You can also try to use a very small flathead to just tuck that bead back in there. And then you should be golden. All right, we'll go ahead and get the rest of the screws in. We'll be back. Another thing I really like about the Hard Parks is his bolt pattern, right? For the beads, it's symmetrical and even. So you can do just 4 bolts if you want. We could put a silver bolts in here and just do these 4 red, or we could even do opposite where these were all red and then have some silver 4, or just put these in and leave the 4 here open, or do them all. But I really like, you know, I've seen some where there's an odd number of holes, and I just don't like that. So I really like that there's an even number of holes here, and that, you know, like I said, you can be symmetrical with how you put your bolts in if you don't want to use all the bolts. And same goes for the hubs here, right? Only thing is there's not as many holes, so you could do 3. I've seen that, or do like these silver, these red. That's a thing. So that's pretty cool, but you probably wouldn't just do the 4. They're not completely spaced properly for that because there's less holes. There's only 6. But still, I really dig that. There's a lot in the faces. There's a bunch so that you can rotate how the faces sit. That's why there's extra holes in the faces, so that when you rotate your faces, the bolts will still go through. So there's 12 holes there. But yeah, just another little detail that I really like. And another thing, which I don't know if I'd recommend it, but if you really wanted to have a super wide stance in deep dish, you could just put the hub on the other side, and now you have a deep dish, right? With your different faces. And you can stack them a bunch. And if you had like 3 faces stacked, it would be out a couple extra millimeters, and you could have a huge offset in deep dishes if you really wanted to. But again, it just goes to show the customizability of the wheels, which is awesome. So let's go ahead and try one of these red hubs. Let's see what that looks like back there. So I think we're going to do this. I kind of dig the triangle or arc reactor looking, what is it? Flux capacitor. The flux capacitor kind of look. I don't know. We can always switch it up. Tell us in the comments below what you think we should do. What kind of pattern or colors should we do? Should we do it all red and all red with the silver barrel and the silver hex? Or should we do the red hex in the center with the red barrel and maybe just do them all red, tons of red, or do the center silver? Kind of like all silver here, but with this setup with the outside all red. Tell us below what you think we should do. I think we're going to go with this for now, just because it's fun, it's different. It kind of shows what I was talking about earlier about the different bolt patterns, and it shows red without being too crazy. I think it'll look cool. We'll do that. And plus, we don't even know what body we're running yet. Once we run the body, we may end up wanting it to be a little bit more subtle or more crazy. Not sure yet. So we're going to go ahead and build them all like this, and I guess we'll be back when we're done with that.
A little longer than a few minutes later.
Now we're on to the motor and transmission and motor mount. We're using the OGRC transmission. The Komodos that we got also came with the Furatech motor mount. The only problem was, and I saved you the pain of watching it, we put it all together and it was hitting on our our front upper links. Well, it doesn't really matter. They're all deadbolt fronts. So it was hitting on our upper links. And it didn't really matter which way we faced the motor, forward, backward, we flipped the skid. It was just hitting. The motor sat too low with the Furatech mount. We also tried a couple other mounts, the Albin mount, and that's just way too low. And the only mount we could find that sat high enough was this Acker's Micro Komodo mount. And it sets at very center and should give us plenty of clearance. Maybe not plenty, but it should give us clearance for what we need. And we won't be hitting links. If we're lucky, we'll even clear our brace. We have a brace that goes right where the motor kind of wanted to sit with the other motor mount. It was hitting the brace if we flipped it to the other side. So we hope that this will clear it. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get this mount on and get this motor mounted, and then I'll show you. All right, we got the motor mount all on there. Looks like a bunny rabbit, kind of, or a pig tilting his head. I'm not sure. Either way, you can see it mounts the motor very high up. So not the best for center of gravity, but definitely helpful when you have some clearance issues with your links. All right, nice and smooth there. The motor uses these brass standoffs, and you basically go just like so. Now we want to be sure that we have a good mesh. Remember, a good mesh means that you are having just the tiniest bit of play between the ring or the pinion and the spur. Ring and pinion. You want to kind of tighten your screws down as much as you can, but to where you're able to still move, because especially with these standoffs, because it'll cant or be crooked. And so you want to get it as straight as possible so that it's nice and flush, but also be able to move it and get yourself just enough. You actually want to turn it just a little bit so our motor wires are a little bit away from that nut on the spur. Go ahead and give it a little snug. Let's check our play there, just enough. Let's go ahead and make it a little snug. Check it. Still got a little play in there. Looks like we're good the first time on this guy. So basically you should be able to hold the motor and just move this spur just the tiniest bit. If it's too much, you'll end up stripping the gear, and if it's not enough play, then you'll end up causing wear and tear or possibly burning up your motor or ESC, basically causing resistance. So you want just a little bit. Should be good there. Awesome. All right. So here we go. This is, which is the front. Doesn't really matter, I guess. This is the front. So actually we are going to have to flip this skid, because when we were testing, we flipped it and the motor's facing to the rear. And we actually want the motor facing towards the front. So let's see. This guy back here. Snug it up. Oh, that is close. Oh, look at that. Make sure we're nice and snug. Oh, it's just, this one's just barely hitting. So we may have to just Dremel down just a little bit on this brace, just to give us, I mean, it's like, if I push hard enough, just a little bit, it makes clearance. So I wonder if when I mean, yeah, it's rubbing. We don't want it to rub too much. Oh, you can see. We're just going to take a little bit off, just a tiny, tiny bit. Go ahead and Dremel it just a little so it's not rubbing. It probably would work itself a little groove in there, but I'd rather not. I'd rather just take out a tiny bit. And there we go. I don't know if you're going to be able to see that, but there is just enough space in there. And we gave ourselves a little bit of extra. You can see we trimmed her down just a little bit. But that's nice and snug. I'm pushing real hard. And we got clearance. You can kind of see light through there. We're good. Now the unfortunate part is our skids are backwards. This is the front of the truck, because remember we've got brass up here on the servo trays. We also have the larger ball bearings on the front. That's how we know it's the front. Otherwise we wouldn't remember. Actually, I think we marked the axles. Did we mark them? Oh yeah, these have little Sharpie marks right here saying rear, R for rear. And those, yeah, so this is the front. This is heavier. We need to turn the motor facing forward. So we have to flip both skids. So that's kind of unfortunate because in our testing we were flipping them around and stuff. So we're going to go ahead and flip both skids the other way so our motor's face like so. On the back here we should have no issues. Once the, here, you can actually check because this one's going the opposite way. Put our motor in. Ooh, that's close. That's real close when we do full articulation. Or full travel, whatever. It does not hit though, but it is close. So we're going to go ahead and flip the skids, and we should be good. So we'll end up with all of our motor bias forward. The weight of the motor will be forward and forward. Alrighty, we'll be back. Alright, motors are in. Got clearance. Got our drive shafts in. Made sure we phased them. Everything's good back here. Now we just need to get our Lizard Ultimate. Well, our Lizard Ultimates. We got one already open. Got this new guy here. And then we're going to be running double here. And we're going to have to mess with some wiring. Probably not going to show all the details of that since we already went through that in the video earlier. I'm just going to get it in here. And yeah, see how we're doing. So we were trying to figure out our electronics layout and what the best way to lay everything out was going to be. You know, we weren't sure if we were going to do battery in the middle or battery on the side. What I think we're going to end up with, well, you can see what we did here. We added this little kind of brace or platform here just to go over the drive shaft. Because you can see over here, drive shaft is exposed, obviously. And so it makes it hard to put anything there. We were thinking we could put either the ESC there or the receiver. You know, at some point, I'm sure we'll switch over to the Noble or something along those lines and just use a single receiver and lighten it up. But again, for this project, I wanted to use the stock V1 SCX24 stuff just to highlight that it's an SCX24. And we're going to probably be running these 3S batteries here. So I think I want the battery and the ESC, since those are the two heaviest things, on the sides. That way it's balanced. I could put the ESC in the middle here, but then the problem becomes it's heavier on one side because the receiver is pretty light, especially if we get a smaller receiver in the future. And this all may change once we get a body, who knows. But for now, I went ahead and made this brace. That way we can actually put some stuff down in there and not have to worry about the drive shaft rubbing on it. And gives us a place to actually mount it. So I think we're going to do this. We'll basically just get this guy kind of mounted in here like so. Probably flip it around. I don't know. Maybe we'll do it like that. The servo plugs come out the side. It's a little tall. Again, not ideal, but we'll probably do a small receiver in the future, or we'll decase this guy and we can actually can't really mount it there, I guess. Even decased, it'll end up hitting the servo. I'm not sure what we'll do in the future. For now, just to get it running, we're going to do this. And yeah, once we get this all taped in here, we'll be back. And we're also going to do this side with the new brace and the same stuff. So it'll be one setup here and one setup, same thing here. Here we have it. It's not pretty. I don't have any shortened wires. I just wound them up. We've got our splitter here, battery, and ESC, but it's working. Ooh, our tire is way off. Our flub. So that's good. So I realized after we went through all of that with the servos to flip the servo direction, we didn't need to. I don't know why. Somehow in my brain I was thinking that we needed to flip the servo because it's facing the other way. We wanted them to be mirrored. So this is not correct. They should be mirrored. Crab walking, not mirrored, sorry. They should be crab walking. And you didn't need to reverse the servo to do that, I guess. I don't know why I was thinking you would, because you want this one to go right and this one would be going right as well. So whatever, oops. But now you know you can do it if you ever need to. We did pull our servo horns off before we powered up just to make sure that everything was centered. We had to recenter it. We'll have to do the same on the back here. But yeah, seems fine. I'm kind of happy with this electronics layout for now. Like I said, once we get a body, this is probably going to totally change because we're going to try to get that body on here, whatever body we choose, as low as possible. And yeah, the receiver just kind of sticks up kind of high here. It's not too bad. But yeah, and we'll definitely clean up the wiring, shorten everything properly once we know the permanent home of all the electronics. So, all right, let's go ahead and get the back on. And then we're kind of done till we get a body. And that'll be another video because we don't have one yet. We're working with somebody trying to get some ideas. Why don't you put in the comments below what you think it should be? Everybody's going to say flatbed, wrecker, hauler, or something along those lines, but we really don't want to do the obvious. Or they're going to say military cab over, right? Military cab over truck. Well, we want something different. We like different things. If you saw our 6x6 Mias build, you know, we kind of like stuff that's not the obvious. So we'll figure something cool out, hopefully. Yeah. All right, let's get this done. This is taking like 2 hours to fab this up and wire this and make sure things. So now we gotta do the back. So we'll be back.
More moments later.
There we have it. Everything's in there. Again, it's not all buttoned up and pretty yet, but we're not going to do that until we have the body. We've got we updated both of our lizards because they have to be both on the same firmware. All the settings are exactly the same. We recalibrated the lizards both for our dead zone, our endpoints, and now we're good to go. We had to flip the direction on one. I don't know why it was reversed, but we are good to go there. We just have to fix our steering because these need to go the same direction. And then the rear, we just have them on channel 3 right now. We need to set our endpoints because that is way too far and not good. Like I showed earlier in the electronic setup, we're probably going to end up using this Bastions, but I want to try it with this, mainly just to have fun with this guy. So here, we'll bind this up real quick. All right, we're all bound up now. Again, it's not truly proportional, but it's fun. Lets you do some steering like this. And it kind of feels kind of proportional once you're out on the rocks. A little bit. I mean, it's not, again, but it's still fun. We do need to fix our endpoints here. Probably try to trim this a little bit. And we'll have to do that on the computer. So we're going to get that done. And then I guess we're done for now. We're actually heading to Beat the Creek here tomorrow. So we're going to take this guy with us out to Beat the Creek. Probably get a little bit of footage. Throw it in this video. So before we totally packed up, we needed to do some fine-tuning adjustments. I want to show you that stuff. I went ahead and widened this guy up a little bit. It's kind of hard to tell, but it is 10 millimeters wider. We added +5 kind of wheel spacers. They're actually hex hubs from another set of wheels, but they work just fine. You can see what's going on in there. And they widen them up about 5 millimeters per side. Not necessarily good for our scrub radius, but we were kind of having some clearance issues, and especially under compression, mostly right here. So the extra offset is going to prevent that. Still might hit on the shock here a little bit, but it's much, much better than it was. We also did some cool tuning to the servos. So on the rear, where it's doing full left or full right, the non-proportional, again, this won't matter once we, use the Bastions or do a totally different setup as far as, a true, we could end up with using a Noble or something like that, just where we'll have an actual crawl mode, and then it won't matter as much. But we were able to turn down the power just a little bit on the rears, also turn down the dampening factor and the sensitivity. They have like a sensitivity, which is kind of like your neutral, your throttle neutral or whatever, where basically it depends on how much, if you have drift in your controller or something. So we just went ahead and turned that down. That way the full lock, we never have to worry about it, not being true center. The other thing is, like I said, turning the power down just a little bit and the dampening factor up means that it's not going to full lock real hard. And just kind of, because again, it's full left or full right. So we wanted to kind of soften that a little bit, and dampening factor will help with that. And so we're turning down the power just a little bit. That way we're not kind of burning up our servos or causing issues. And again, it's the rear, so we don't need quite as much power or quite as much speed. So turning that down will help a ton. But yeah, other than that, I think we're good to go. We got our transmitter all stickered up with the brands that supported this build or helped support the build. We're missing OGRC because there's no OGRC stickers. But yeah, should be fun. I also want to weigh this guy, so we're going to weigh it. Should be good. We're not touching. Whoa. That's 1,033 grams with no body. Do have batteries in. 1,033 grams, guys. Jeez. Yeah. That's crazy. And I guess we should power this guy on and actually show everything before we head to Beat the Creek. So power that on. HESC. Ooh, buddy. And the rear. So you can see the rear is like a full lock left-right. There's no proportional. But, again, still fun, still cool. And we will change that later. I just want to do this for the initial setup. And look at this. Ooh, buddy. She goes. That seems good. I dig it. I mean, this remote's actually pretty fun to use. That's the main reason I wanted to do it this way, is because I love using the, and people look at it like, what? It's like the most insane SCX24 ever. I think we're going to call it that. That's what we're going to call. That's what we'll end the video. Clickbait. Most insane SCX24 ever. We don't even have a body yet. We could do a temp body. This is not what we're doing because, again, we don't want to do military, like a traditional military, but we could do something like that. This is a Tinker Time body. That could be fun. But then, again, what do we do with all this? Just exposed? It's higher. It's harder to do a flatbed there. Again, we've got an idea. We're working on it. And, yeah. But, just to give you an idea. Pretty friggin' sweet. I guess we'll have to just see the people's reactions at Beat the Creek. Should be kind of fun to see everybody. I'll probably put this at the Hard Park booth. Maybe Fear Tech booth for a little bit. But we'll definitely stop by the Hard Park booth and show since they'll be there. And Fear Tech's going to be there as well. And Reefs will probably be there. So we'll show them all, obviously. But it'll probably be sitting mostly at the Hard Park booth. Just because, well, their chassis, their wheels. And that's kind of the core of the build. The chassis, definitely. All right. Let's get her packed up. All right. She's all packed up with about 6 or 7 other rigs. And we're going to head off to Beat the Creek. So why don't you go ahead and check out that video over here. It'll be posted probably before this one is, and yeah, we'll see you there.
Bringing in anchor. Is it Ken?
Yeah.
Yes, you will. I didn't say sit.
Next up, worries on the ball.
So big sad. That was all the footage we got at Beat the Creek. We were so busy and talking to so many people and had so much other stuff going on. And we showed a lot of people the truck. We just forgot to film it. We got the one shot at the Reefs booth. We didn't even get any photos of it in the Hard Park booth. It was in the Hard Park booth the whole weekend. And it was in one of their garages. It looked awesome. And we totally forgot to get pictures. Even the Hard Park guys forgot to get pictures. But there was a ton of people just oogling it. And everybody we showed was just amazed and thought it was the coolest thing ever. So super excited for that. We're definitely going to do another video kind of showing when we get the body, for sure. When we get that in, obviously, we'll get the video for that done. We're also probably going to just do kind of a running video, short, because this video is a beast. It's probably going to be over an hour and a half long. So yeah, we're going to probably try to do a little short 10-minute little overview video and just kind of running it, showing it for those that don't want to sit through an hour and a half long build video. For you guys that stuck around for this whole video, you guys are awesome. You're real troopers. Make sure you share the video, and especially the shorter video when it does come up. If you like the build, let people know it's out there. We want to get some interest in it. We want to show people what kind of crazy stuff you can do with the minis. A lot of people in the larger scale, so they have minis or they know about minis, but they don't really, I don't think they respect them quite like, especially the old school guys, right? The old school guys, they don't respect the minis like they do the big ones. So, but I think that's because they don't see what can be done with them. They don't know that there's companies like these companies out there doing upgrades. You know, you can build a totally capable and insane rig out of, you know, the Reefs and the Fear Tech and the Hard Park and the 3Flow9 and the OGRC and the Mazz and all these different companies that were involved in this. Yeah, they're just insane stuff you can do with them. And they don't know that yet, so we need to show them. Anyway, guys, make sure you like, subscribe, share, hit that notification bell. Support the channel by sharing. That's huge. By subscribing, that's huge. And if you want to represent some swag, we have swag down below. Check that out as well. And yeah, it's a long one. It's kind of a weird feeling because, like I said, it's been 8 months in the making. We're still not done, so we'll have the body. Once we have the body on there, I'm sure this feeling will be even more amplified. Happiness and kind of sadness because the build is kind of done. Here, I want to go ahead and actually show you this as well. This is the build sheet, and you can look at that. It's absolutely insane. You can see the total cost of this build is nearing $2,300 without the body, which is just it's mind-blowing, and I never thought it was going to be like that when I started the project. I didn't think it was going to be as involved. I was like, oh, we can take two chassis, slap them together. It'll be fun. It'll be easy. It'll be different. People will get a rise out of people about it. And then it just turned into something like a work of art. Like I heard somebody talking to the hard part guys about just their chassis in general and their wheels, and work of art came up, and they also pointed at this guy. So I was like, you know, it kind of is. And not my work of art, right? Like everybody involves work of art. Everybody involved is just building premium products to help us further our awesome little hobby that we love. And so definitely support these manufacturers, guys. Get out there and build something with their stuff. And yeah, and it's not just these guys. I mean, there are way more than just these guys, and I can't list them all, or I would, but tons of other companies doing similar stuff. All the ones out there that are respectable and providing quality service, customer service, and quality parts. You know, you gotta respect those guys and support them as much as you can. Anyway, I'm ranting again. It's what I do. It's why I have a YouTube channel. For some reason, I just talk a lot. So yeah, make sure you get out there and build something awesome, whether it's a car, truck, whatever, courses, tracks, communities. Build something. Add something awesome to this hobby space, guys. Probably not going to smash this, crash this, or bash this. But we could still end up breaking some expensive parts, so we're going to be careful. Take care, guys. Peace.